Welcome to the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Podcast. My name is Nathalie. I'm a nutritionist, a human potential and epigenetic coach, and I created this podcast to bring you the latest ways to take control of your health and longevity. We cover it all, from new technology to ancestral health practices, personalized interventions, and a very special interest of mine, peptides. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, guys. Today's episode is a deep dive back into the science of molecular hydrogen. I know that most of you who've been listening to this podcast have heard about molecular hydrogen before. And as a matter of fact, my guest today, it's our second go around together. We recorded our first podcast together at the beginning of my podcast in the fall of 2020. His name is Alex Tarnava, and he is one of the developers or the founders of the Open Cup tablet molecular hydrogen technology. I think I said all those words in the right order, maybe not. Bottom line, those molecular hydrogen tablets that we drop into our water that then release high dose molecular hydrogen that we are then able to drink and bring to our bodies as a powerful signaling molecule that it is. He's responsible in large part for that. And, you know, it's funny. I think one way that we could describe Alex is really as a problem solver and as a truth seeker, because he came to this vocation or passion, if you will, in terms of his career, really because he was looking to solve a problem for himself and he couldn't find a good enough solution. And so he dug and he dug. And when he found out that there wasn't the right solution out there for him, he went out and found someone who could partner with him and help him not only to create it for himself, but then to bring it to the world. And so was born drinkHRW and the molecular hydrogen technology that many people like myself and many of my clients rely on a day-to-day basis. Suffice to say that the potential of molecular hydrogen is just being tapped into. If you go to PubMed, there will be reams of clinical trials and studies going on. And molecular hydrogen can ultimately help with performance. It can help with health optimization. It can help with recovery. It really is an incredible molecule. And I think we're really just tapping into what it can really do for us. And we do know what it can do. And we talk about a lot of those things on this episode, but we don't just talk about molecular hydrogen. Alex himself had a bit of a bad run-in with a pretty bad virus at the beginning of this year, which he talks about at length in this episode, and how it leveled him in a way that really shocked him, what he believes the mitigating factors were to getting taken down by this thing, and his journey. And then we talk about some of the clinical trials that drinkHRW has contributed to and how they've been able to keep their professional space from the results while at the same time contributing to the research. So it's a big episode. It's chock-a-block full of stuff. I hope that you enjoy it. I really always enjoy talking to Alex. He's a great guy. And as some of you may already know, you may have figured this out, drinkHRW was one of the first sponsors of this podcast. And to them, I am super grateful for that. And as I said to them when we signed them on as a podcast sponsor, frankly, I've been yapping about molecular hydrogen for the last 4 years. I would still talk about molecular hydrogen, even if they weren't a podcast sponsor. And in my mind, in terms of what I do, being in integrity and taking on sponsors that I buy into wholeheartedly myself is a huge piece of knowing that I'm bringing you guys what I believe really is the best. And so if I'm going to put their name on my podcast, it's because I really, truly believe in their stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this disclaimer part of this intro, which is, as you all know, nothing that is in this podcast is about medical advice or treating or curing or anything, any kind of disease. This is all information for you guys. And if Alex is about one thing, it's about providing people with information. So if you want to read more about molecular hydrogens, you want to dig into the studies and the science, you can go to drinkHRW.com. He's got some great articles in there. He's got lists of clinical trials and studies. So lots and lots of research that has nothing to do with his company, just because he feels it's so important to share this research with people. If you're looking to buy molecular hydrogen and try it out for yourself, you can go to drinkHRW.com and you can use longevity10, get 10% off your entire order. And you can use that promo code over and over and over again, as many times as you want, because it's just that important to Alex to make this product available to everybody. What else can I tell you? If you're looking, you can also follow drinkHRW on Instagram. So you've got the website, you've got Instagram. Then if you're looking to connect with me, if you have any comments, questions, anything at all about this podcast, whether it's this episode or another episode, you can find me through my Facebook group, which is Optimizing Superhuman Performance. You can also find me through my website, which is natnidham.com. And of course, you can find me on Instagram just under my name, Nathalie Nidham. Last but not least, if you would rather be watching this instead of just listening to me talk to you, then you can go to YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel there as well, Nathalie Nidham, and you can watch many of the interviews that I've conducted over the last several months and moving forward. So thank you so much for being here. If you get value from this podcast, please make sure that you share it out with your friends, your family, your networks, and that you leave us a review, because those reviews are the things that allow us to be seen and to be found and to help more people and get the message out there that you can live longer and better and more vibrantly, and how to do it. So thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate you guys, and enjoy the episode. Hey folks, before we launch into the episode, just one thing. We have a sponsor. drinkHRW.com. This sponsor is all about the magic of molecular hydrogen, and they make the most incredible molecular hydrogen products. They make molecular hydrogen tablets that you can easily just drop into your water every morning as you start your day. They actually even have flavored ones in raspberry flavor, if that's your jam. I like mine plain with a squeeze of lemon, but I also love the raspberry. They even have tablets that you can drop into your bathtub to get a whole body treatment of molecular hydrogen, and tablets you can drop into a bowl of water and apply to your face. And so you might be sitting there wondering, so big deal, why would I drink hydrogen? I mean, hydrogen is the smallest molecule on the periodic table. Who cares about hydrogen? Well, let me tell you, you care about hydrogen. A lot about what we talk about in this podcast is about health span and lifespan. It's about aging well. It's about longevity. It's about managing your body system so that you can look, feel, and perform your best. And molecular hydrogen delivers on these points like nothing else does. Think about this. Molecular hydrogen actually combats oxidative stress as well as supporting a healthy inflammatory response. Now, we know that inflammation is at the root of virtually every major disease out there. We also know that it makes us basically age faster. So I would qualify molecular hydrogen as a preventative aging supplement, and it is one of the easiest, healthiest, best out there with zero negative side effects. It indirectly mitigates the damages of those three issues that ultimately lead the way in virtually any disease state and fundamentally are the driving forces in why we age. We're talking imbalances in oxidative stress, in inflammation, and as well as increased insulin resistance. So you don't really have to take my word for it, guys. You can go to the drinkHRW.com website, and I'm going to tell you that it is one of the most incredible repositories of research and articles all about molecular hydrogen. And you know what I love about this company is they don't just run around telling you how great molecular hydrogen is. They don't just cherry pick the best research articles. They're full on, flat out, pretty honest about this article. This clinical trial, well, it didn't show us much yet. Here are the flaws in it, or here's what we think. It's an incredible resource, but I can tell you that whatever it is that you're dealing with, there's probably a clinical trial going on somewhere looking at whether or not molecular hydrogen can be helpful. And I will tell you that in my practice, I've seen it be helpful to all kinds of people. People who are suffering from joint pain, because molecular hydrogen is able to target inflammation, because it's able to support a healthy inflammatory response in the body. And it also promotes antioxidant and oxidative balance. You guys, you don't want to just be taking antioxidants by the handful. You want something on board that's going to help to keep you in balance, to not too high, not too low, just keep you in that Goldilocks state. So like I said, I have clients who were blown away about how effective this molecular hydrogen, taking it every day, sometimes soaking an injured joint in molecular hydrogen water, what a difference it made in their mobility and in their ability to recover from their injuries and even also, of course, from workouts. So you're going to be hearing me talk a lot more about molecular hydrogen in the future. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I encourage you to go to drinkHRW.com/superhuman, and you can use promo code longevity10, and that will get you 10% off everything that you purchase. And you can try molecular hydrogen for yourself. And by all means, reach out to me and let me know how you liked your molecular hydrogen experience. And by all means as well, please, please, please check out their website. It is one of the most incredible resources that I've seen for molecular hydrogen research. So thanks for being here today, guys. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the podcast, Alex. It's great to have you back.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. And always. And it's been months and months since we recorded our first episode. Not quite a year.
Yeah, I think, what was that, September last year?
Yeah, I think it was September. So we're almost at the year mark, and a ton has happened since then. Both, COVID was in full swing when we recorded last time. But
everyone thought I was pessimistic that I said we won't be out of the woods in a year from now. And everyone thought I was crazy when I was saying that last September.
I think that I don't even think we're fully out of the woods yet now either. So
no, and even then, there's going to be little things, I think, for 2 to 3 years regarding international travel and everything, and maybe even longer, right? We see super low vaccination rates in a lot of countries, right? And I get people's concerns about, the vaccines. I was going to wait a year, and see. I wanted to wait for the Novavax vaccine, actually.
Yeah. Is that the Canadian one?
Yeah, they're going to manufacture it in Quebec.
Yeah.
But it was also, I think Novavax came back at 93 or 94% effective. And it was a later stage vaccine. So, it was probably tested against more variants as well than Moderna and Pfizer. But some of the experts that I listened to podcasts on and written reviews on suspected that Novavax's spike protein, technology was going to have the least side effects, right?
Oh, really?
But my tune started changing actually with that when I got COVID for the first confirmed times. I believe it was the second time, because I believe I had it at the start of the pandemic. I had it again last November. I was asymptomatic, right? Bored out of my mind, right, at home.
Yeah.
I got really, really stupid one day. It was day 11 of quarantine. I drank 3 bottles of wine and ordered pizza.
You're kidding me. Why? Let me see what I can do to really mess up my body while it's dealing with this thing.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know. I thought it had run its course, I think,
Yeah, well, 11 days, you're like, okay, I'm 3 days away from the end of quarantine. It's not an unreasonable thing to think I'm through this thing.
And I am not the type that can be locked in a house for 14 days. I was out of my mind, even with my home gym and stuff. I just was losing it, couldn't go walk through nature or anything. And I had done a huge workout that day, right?
Oh, on top of that. Okay. Yeah.
On top of that, and I didn't intend to have 3 bottles of wine. I just want to point that out. I opened one and it led to 2.
It's not like you lined them up in front of you and said, today's job is,
Yeah, exactly. And I took a bunch of hydrogen, and I didn't feel too rough the next day, but I did another big workout to try and kill the hangover completely. That night, I think it resurrected in my body, because I had a low-grade fever, and my muscles were some of the worst muscle pain I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
Throughout the night, I was just seized. I did not sleep that night. I was just annihilated. My fever was gone by the next day, but I was absolutely annihilated with muscle pain, right?
Wow.
Especially throughout my back and upper back. It only lasted less than 2 days. So that wasn't bad, but the really, really insane thing that happened was it devastated my blood sugar and my metabolism.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
I went from my fasting blood glucose before that was 4.1 to 4.3 millimolars, right? And it was rock solid. I would maybe spike to 4.5, 4.6 if I got drunk and ate pizza the day before, right? Like,
okay,
which
is still nothing.
Exactly. I went over 6 for a while.
Really? So how long for a while? Like for weeks?
Well, I'm still over 5, right?
You still haven't you haven't actually
not
fully recovered.
I gained 30, 40 pounds. I want to say 40 because I lost muscle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I gained 30 pounds on the scale, but I lost muscle and strength. So I want to say I gained 40 pounds of fat in less than 2 months.
Really?
Right? And I couldn't time restricted eat. I'd wake up in the morning dizzy, right? Like I think I was like entering like acute diabetes or pre-diabetes.
Yeah.
I tried to fast a couple times and would like have throbbing headaches and like would feel like I was going to pass out and faint. I had to like slowly start repairing that. And even now, I've gotten back to my regular fasting, up to my exercise. I did 220-hour fasts, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still hovering around 5, right?
Really? So you still have, so it's almost like we could say that it hit your pancreas. And somehow could it be that the 3 bottles of wine, it's almost like it set it up to, it almost created it could have, I mean, I'm kind of like stretching here, but it's almost like, could it be that having overstressed the liver and pancreas by the drinking and everything else almost gave whatever virus was in your system still a target? There's this theory in Ayurvedic medicine that disease will seek out and affect kind of like your weak link.
Yeah.
And you wonder if there might be some of that at play here somehow.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just know there's so many stories like this. I mean, even like people I know, like an MD, PhD, researcher that I know and was talking to, basically the exact same thing happened to him, minus the alcohol, right? He had almost asymptomatic, super mild case. Ironically, he's an MD, PhD who researches metabolic diseases, specifically diabetes and NASH. And he gained like 40, 50 pounds and had like acute onset diabetes for a couple months after having a super mild case of COVID. Another friend of mine, PhD candidate, researcher, biohacker, super healthy guy, had like heart issues after a super mild bout of COVID. You see lots of pro athletes actually. They're asymptomatic. They didn't even know they had it. And then they can't train after. And now they haven't competed or played in months or a year because their bodies haven't recovered, whether it's their lungs or their heart, and they just fatigued and can't have energy. And the more I kind of dealt with that and was reading about more and more super healthy, young, fit people that didn't have really any symptoms of the virus while it was in their system, but are dealing with potentially permanent side effects. And I just started thinking, okay, like now I'm leaning to get, vaccinated, right? Like,
well, especially thinking that you got it twice, right? And now with variants floating around.
And I can't confirm I got it the first time, but I had COVID-like symptoms in March, right when the pandemic started. Like serious fever, dry cough, right? Like in bed basically for like 4 or 5 days. And it was 4 or 5 days after I got off a flight from California when the pandemic was just starting and I'd been, in meetings. So they weren't testing really anyone back then at the start of the pandemic. But in retrospect, it's a good chance I got that, especially because my wife didn't get sick. And with the seasonal flu, she gets it way worse than I do. Right. So the fact that she slept in the same bed as me, as I had a fever,
but wouldn't she have gotten, but if it was COVID, given how contagious it is, wouldn't she have gotten it too then?
Well, she could have been asymptomatic. That's kind of,
oh, I see.
I was kind of,
yeah. Oh, I see. That's where you're going with that. Yeah.
Well, she was younger than me at that time. She was still, training for an Ironman, you know what I mean? And she could have just been asymptomatic, right? Who knows? So all the signs point to, I had it then, because if it was a flu, we know that she's kind of like a baby with the flu, right? She gets knocked out by it.
Right.
But yeah, nothing with her. And she didn't get sick the second time. Like when I had COVID in November, she didn't get sick that time either.
Interesting. So that's really interesting, right? So, because you've talked about all these different scenarios, and then you talk about your wife, who not only doesn't get it, but as an athlete, like, she just seems to have skated through both times.
You'll see that, right? You'll see that, right? Like you'll see, like with UFC fights, they'll get canceled, and a whole team, all the coaches and a fighter all test positive for COVID, and none of them have any symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 times, or 49 out of 50, who knows what the odds are, they're all fine and have no long-term side effects. But just the odd one, and lots of high-profile ones, seem to have like permanent issues, right? Even after like an asymptomatic case.
Yeah, or lasting issues anyway. Permanent's a long time.
Yeah, we don't know.
We're only months out, right?
Yeah. So, but you got to think, if you're in the prime of your career and have now not been able to train properly for a year.
Yeah, plus, no, that's. I mean, it could be a career-ending event for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So did you get vaccinated? I don't like asking people, but seeing as
I've got my first dose. I'm getting my second dose of Moderna on Thursday.
So you've gone for mRNA.
Yeah. Well, and I went for Moderna over Pfizer, right? And I was one of the fussy people. And if they try and give me Pfizer on Thursday, I'm going to say no, because a lot of countries are not accepting Canada's mix and match system, right?
So because it makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. It's idiotic, right? And, one of the things that really pushed me into getting vaccinated right now is the travel.
Yeah.
Right. Like I need to get back to traveling for my business again. So if Canada tries to give me a different vaccine than the first one I got, I'm going to say no. Right. Yeah. Absolutely not. And I know our health authorities are trying to guilt everyone and saying that this is the right thing to do. But you know what? Other health authorities are saying this is stupid. Yeah. Right. So why should we trust our experts just because
they're trying to get it done? They're literally trying to check a box, I think they're literally just wanting to say we got X% of the population done. And there's no science that says that this works. So why would you create another giant experiment within another giant experiment? Like it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So now I opted for Moderna because it doesn't make sense. And I've talked to some experts. I don't know. Pfizer is reporting about 1.1% of people who get, their vaccine have, a serious adverse event with joint pain, right? And worsening joint pain. And, as you may and listeners may remember, the reason I got into hydrogen is a mystery virus gave me polyarthritis, right?
Right. So you've got a long sordid history with viruses, don't you?
Yeah. So, the fact that one of Pfizer's most common side effects is serious and worsening joint pain doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't make sense to any of the experts I've talked to why Pfizer's reporting this and Moderna isn't, because they're almost identical vaccines.
Yeah.
But the fact is Pfizer's reporting this and Moderna isn't, right? So I went with Moderna, and I had no side effects after the first dose anyways.
Which is interesting because I know people who'd had COVID, who got Pfizer probably maybe a month later, and who literally for 24 to 48 hours felt like they had gone right back down the toilet again.
See, my wife was seriously like fatigued, like, flu-like symptoms, just slept on the couch all day after her first dose. The second dose, she was slightly fatigued, but not
Oh,
nearly
dear.
as bad as the first dose, whereas usually they're reporting it's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
People feel worse after the second dose than the first.
Yeah.
I felt nothing right after the first dose. I didn't even have like general soreness around the injection site. So
Yeah. So
I'm
anyway,
crossing my fingers. Yeah.
anyway, this has turned into a different kind of podcast.
Yeah, no, sorry.
That's all right. Not to worry. I mean, that's
It's
part of the
okay.
beauty of podcasting. So let me ask you
We can
this.
segue into the COVID stuff with hydrogen.
But let me ask you this. So in your battles with COVID and the whole thing, did you find, I mean, let me anecdotally from your own personal experience, did you find molecular hydrogen to be helpful at all for you? Or was it so bad that it literally was beyond the reach?
It's tough to say, right?
Yeah. You'd have to go back and do it again without hydrogen.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like as a case experiment, I'm like, did hydrogen help me be asymptomatic? Right. Before, and then just couldn't deal with the stress of me downing 3 bottles of red and,
and 2 big workout and the pizza. And the other thing I think that is not irrelevant here is 2 massive workouts on either side of this.
And there was nothing I could do. You know what I mean? I was bored out of my wits at home.
Yeah,
like,
no.
Usually I go walk through the forest 1-2 hours a day, writing emails, answering phone calls, just to keep moving. I pace in my house throughout the day.
So why did you do that? Because if you have access to forest and there's nobody else there, you didn't feel comfortable just going out for a walk?
Oh, the forests are busy. All the trails are busy, especially.
So it's trails. Okay, so it's not like private forest.
No.
Okay.
Well, I've got an acreage now, but I haven't moved there yet. Right.
Oh, okay. So you're not there yet. I see.
If I had to quarantine again, I'm 150 hours into hardscaping and landscaping, and I probably have 300 hours to go. Right. Like, I'd have so much to do. I spent 4.5 hours there yesterday just shoveling river rock and, tamping the ground because I'm getting close to putting a lawn down. But I'm building a pond with a waterfall coming off the cliff and a stream. So, I mean, I've got 6 months of work to do on that property. So if I was quarantined again now, it would be no problem. I'd have
pitch a tent.
But no, back then, like I was still in the city, just crammed in my place.
Yeah, no, I got quarantined this year, actually, after traveling to the States, and I just about lost my marbles. And I'd had no exposure and I was just stuck in my house. And, I have a reasonably nice house and I have access to a home gym and the whole 9 yards, but there's something about not being able to leave your house and I have a backyard, but it's just not conducive. Okay, let's move on to our topic of the day. And that is, and to your point, let's segue because there are a couple, they're not fully published. They're not published yet, but you have taken part in a couple of trials using molecular hydrogen to see how it can be maybe helpful with COVID-19. So maybe you can give us a sneak peek at that in what you can say before publishing.
Sure. So first it started, there was like an open label study in hospitalized patients. I don't think that's going to be published, right? Because there's no controls or anything. And everything that it found was kind of subjective, right? It was like reducing of symptom severity, like improved energy and, reduction in complaints from the patients, all that kind of fun stuff. That caused them to do kind of like a small phase 2 style trial, like 24 participant, double blind, placebo controlled, randomized. Data was all over the map, as you'd expect, because they were recruiting all ages, all conditions, everything like that, only 24 people. But a couple things did come through as significant, even with how erratic the data is, like not just like all the age groups, but COVID hits people so much different. Some people it
Clearly.
attacks the heart, some people it attacks the lungs, you know what I mean? Like it expresses so different in different people. So a lot of the markers were just all over the map. And it's like, oh, there could be something there, or there could be something there, but the standard deviations were so big, right? That, you know, with that few people, there's just nothing there.
I was going to say 24 people, you're going to be like, as you say, there's no homogenous
exactly
group within that.
If COVID-19 expressed itself the same to like everyone, then maybe 24 people could be enough, right? Yeah. But with how erratic the disease is, they were just kind of like fishing and seeing like, is anything kind of universal? And what was universal is reduction in fatigue, right? You know, across the board, that was very significant. And then a reduction in interleukin 6, a pro-inflammatory cytokine. So that's you know, something to be hopeful for, because there is a large phase 3 trial underway, you know, for using.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? In that one, so were they administering like using the tablets in water?
Yeah.
And how much and how often, or was that all over the map too?
It was four tablets a day.
And like in 2 shots, or like spread out over 2 different?
No. I think
or do you think it was 1 tablet in water 4 times a day, or you don't know?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it might have been 1 tablet and 250 milliliters 4 times a day at different times. But I haven't read the manuscript recently. It's under peer review. So I'm not confident. I know it was 4 tablets a day. I forget what volume of water at what intervals they were doing it.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to interject here and just say that a lot of what we're going to talk about today is still it's either being peer reviewed or it's not quite published yet. So this podcast probably won't come out for another 6 to 8 weeks. So I will update you guys will have heard in the intro any updates, and we'll try and post links to whatever trials we can in the show notes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. In the phase 3, it's 2 tablets a day, right?
So that's the one that's happening now, right? The phase 3?
Yeah. I know they're recruiting slower than they wanted to. Great for public health. There's less cases of COVID. That's the trial.
Yeah. Well, there's pockets in the States apparently where it's alive and well. So maybe we could focus in Arkansas.
This is throughout Europe, primarily France, right? Is where the phase 3 is underway. So, you know, yeah, they're recruiting less and less, but that one, it's going to be interesting because they're looking at some things like, you know, fatigue and sleep quality and everything like that. But the primary outcomes are hospitalizations and deaths, obviously. But then they're going to be following up with the patients for 1 year after the trial.
Oh, interesting.
Right. To look at prevalence of like post-acute COVID, like long COVID. Right.
Okay.
So
let me go back to you just very briefly. So were you using molecular hydrogen have you been yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I have, and, you know, I know it works on my joints because every time I wash out, and I've washed out, I think twice, you know, and I write about this in a blog called Ideal Dose. Hydrogen, we want to be kind of like, I'm thinking of hydrogen more like exercise. You don't want to do the same dose at the same time of day forever. You're going to start losing the benefits, right? Same thing with cold exposure, heat exposure, right? All these, you know, hormetic stressors that we've adapted to, right?
Yeah. So once it becomes chronic, it's like the body just kind of doesn't respond to it in the same way.
Exactly, right? And we know that continuous exposure to hydrogen has no effect, right? Whereas, you know, acute intermittent pulsing does, right? Mm-hmm. We know that new exercises shock our body a lot more than things we've become accustomed to, right? Yeah. That's why I say you'll see like runners, right? That put in more and more road work, right? Because running is easier and easier for them, and they start losing muscle mass and gaining some fat around the midsection, even though they're running hours a day.
Yeah. And
right?
wearing out their joints, by the way, on top of that.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But you see that at any sport, right? The more you get accustomed to at any physical activity, the less work it becomes, the less stress to your body. We see this kind of stuff with other hormetic stressors. I mean, they've been done some really cool studies in pigs, and I know I talk about this all the time, but you get a pig cold for 4 hours a day, right? And let it be warm the other 20 hours a day. That pig has lowered inflammation, improved redox, right? More white adipose tissue is converted to, it's not quite brown, it's called beige adipose tissue, right? Thermogenesis is activated. All these beneficial results happen. Now, you get pigs cold all day long, and the reverse happens. Inflammation goes up, their oxidative stress goes up. They don't convert white adipose tissue to beige. They actually produce more white adipose tissue, and they gain weight.
Yeah, well, because it's gone from being a hormetic stressor to being just a chronic, miserable stressor. Yeah.
So that's what I try and tell everyone is intermittently pulse your hydrogen, and every 3 to 6 months, wash out. Don't take it for a week, and then change your routine. If you were taking it in the morning, start taking it in the afternoon or before a workout or something like that. So I know that hydrogen's still benefiting me because I've washed out, I think, twice since then, and my joint sees, when I wash out.
Okay, that's a sign.
I'm curious, if the damage I did with that alcohol and everything was just too much for hydrogen to reverse, or, who knows, it might have been even worse. Without hydrogen.
Yeah, there's no way that, there's no real way of knowing for sure.
Well, know with the case study. I mean, I even tried to correct things with one peptide that I thought might help. And I took it for 70 days and monitored my eating and my active calories and everything. And I lost the exact amount of weight that would be expected, by my increase in active calories. And
do you mean without the peptide? Which peptide was it?
CJC 1295 with DAC.
With ipamorelin?
Yeah. There was no improvements in my blood sugar. There was no improvements in my blood pressure, and I had no additional weight loss.
Yeah, I wouldn't. CJC ipamorelin is a funny one because it's basically a growth hormone secretagogue.
Yeah.
I consider fat loss it's kind of like a sidebar benefit, CJC ipamorelin. I'd say that, we could probably talk about this a little bit more another time, but there's a couple of other peptides I would go to for you that are more direct, that may be more impactful, like especially in the world of bioregulators, where you're looking at peptides that can directly help to regenerate and restore function to the pancreas and the liver. Stuff like that. Especially given your experience, it would be a very interesting thing to see what a few months of those with a couple of others stacked on. Yeah. What you might see, because
I was thinking, in trying CJC 1295 with DAC, that with the growth hormone secretion and the IGF-1, that should be promoting more lean body mass and in turn more fat burning, which I didn't see at all, right? And doing body scans too, there was no change above expectation. Actually, since I've stopped, and I even upped my exercise more, because since I've stopped those peptides, I'm not just doing the yard work, and pad work, but we're allowed to spar, again, fight with other people, at kickboxing.
Yeah.
So just in a month of being back to sparring, which is way higher intensity than hitting a bag or hitting pads, with everything. I've seen more body composition changes in this month than in the 2+ months that I was
using the CJC.
Yeah.
But you were doing the with DAC.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're doing once a week?
Yeah.
And the ipamorelin, were you doing that once a week, or were you doing that?
No. I was just doing the CJC 1295 with DAC.
Oh, I see. No ipamorelin. Yeah. I don't know. I might prescribe to a different methodology, but we are not here to talk about peptides. Let's get back to the hydrogen. Okay, so phase 3 clinical trial with COVID is currently underway. We can't talk about it in detail.
Well, yeah, I don't have any data. Yeah, I mean,
no data yet.
Like the rationale that it could help is hydrogen, seems to regulate inflammatory responses. It seems to regulate, redox status, all these things. There seems to be some immune function regulation. So kind of the hope in the trial was that hydrogen would promote a more optimal immune response, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't activate or suppress the immune system, would just promote a healthier immune response. And that was the argument that the researchers used to the government in France and the IRB, which both accepted that hydrogen could, support the immune system. So it's actually not considered a drug trial, right? It's considered a non-drug intervention, by the French government. So that was actually a big hurdle, and that was good. That meant, the ethics board and the government ended up agreeing that hydrogen isn't a drug, that, it could promote the body's ability, that it should be explored to promote the body's ability to do what it's supposed to do.
Yep. Fantastic. That's actually a big win for sure. And so, okay, so that phase 3, that was, you're thinking it was 1 tablet twice a day. Do we want to go, once we're talking about the still to comes, there's a couple of others, and then we can go to the newly published ones that we were going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So there was the elderly study that sounds actually really exciting.
Yeah. So this was a cool study. It was 6 months long, right? 34 participants, all above 70 years old, double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized. One thing to note here is this was done during lockdowns, right? So these elderly people were locked down, weren't living their normal lives too. But in the hydrogen group, they significantly extended their telomeres, right? Whereas the placebo group significantly lost telomere length, right? So I think the hydrogen group were elongated by 4%, whereas the placebo group lost like 12%.
So right? That's 60% spread.
Yeah, no, that is huge, because usually you would not lose anywhere close to that amount in a year, but we know that telomere length might plummet and then actually go up, and it kind of goes like this. So this is a very abnormal period of stress that these people were under. So they saw huge drops in the placebo group, but not only was that protected, but in the hydrogen group, they were lengthened. Right? I'm not an expert here. I can't, talk to this in finer detail, but it showed improvement in DNA methylation is what the author said. And it was significant. One thing that was cool that I asked for them to check, it doubled a marker in the blood, protein in the blood called TET2, which is what they've been linking to young blood. If people have read any of the studies about when you take an elderly mouse and you put the blood of a young mouse into it and they're rejuvenated, that's been linked to TET2, right? So hydrogen doubled TET2. Hydrogen significantly improved brain metabolism above placebo, which we'll talk about more, later, a study that just published today on brain metabolism and hydrogen. So that was pretty cool, especially in this elderly population in improving brain metabolism.
And so did they also observe any kind of differences in cognitive function that may or may not be linked to brain metabolism, like memory score?
Yeah, nothing significant.
Okay.
There, right. But again, it's a 6-month trial.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to tell, right? If it's improving brain metabolism at the end of the 6 months, are they improving their cognition significantly, or is that more protective? Right? Are they going to be protecting decline? And are you going to see a big decline in cognitive function over 6 months? Right? Usually, probably not. Right?
Well, although they did have a control group to compare against. So
yeah, no, that's what I mean. Even for a control group, you think of people, in their 70s, right? Are you going to see, unless someone develops a disease, and nobody develops a disease like Alzheimer's or anything, unless someone develops a disease during that time, you're typically not going to see a plummet in cognition over a 6-month period.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So there wasn't much change, right, anywhere. So there's nothing to do. That would be a more longitudinal study. You'd have to look after like 10 years.
Absolutely.
Right?
But you did say also they had big improvements in pain scores.
So that reached significance in reported pain scores. There were strong trends for some sleep parameters, specifically daytime fatigue and ability to get to sleep. We're actually, there's some stuff that we're seeing in mice that hopefully will be published soon. I know some papers were just submitted that hydrogen has some big effect on sleep of mice, but not really when the mice aren't under stress, right? So, right, like what we're seeing, big improvements, like, and they stress out the mice in all these ways, like wake them up, do all these things. And the mice that have had hydrogen after being stressed out fall back asleep easier. They fall into better quality sleep easier, all these things. Like hydrogen kind of restores them to get back on track with their sleep. But if no disturbances happen, there's no difference, right? Like hydrogen isn't helping their sleep unless there's an external
problem in the first place. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because there was a peptide I wrote about recently called DSIP, deep sleep inducing peptide, and it's supposed to help to induce deep sleep. But what the trials show and explains a lot, because you talk about a peptide like that in a big group like mine, and everybody runs out to buy it and says, okay, I want to see my sleep scores double, my deep sleep scores double. And what the research shows is that unless you've got messed up sleep in the first place, it's not going to do anything for you. So the elderly study, and so when will that be published? Do you know? Do you have any thoughts on that?
You never know with peer review.
So this year, next year?
Hopefully this year. Yeah, hopefully this year. So it's already been submitted to the journal, right?
Okay, so it's in the works.
Journals, some journals can, I don't remember what journal was published. Some journals might take a month to peer review something, and then it's published 2 weeks after, so it could be 6 weeks. Other journals are like a year and a half behind, right? So it really depends what journal the study authors decided to put it in.
Right.
I'd have to check at what the lead times are. Do they need changes? Does it get accepted? All these things, right? Like,
it's a process.
Part of what I'm writing in my book, it's insane, right? It's insane what happens in academia that authors scramble to find journals, right? And journals are specialized, and they're like, okay, this journal looks like a good fit, but can you read the entire scope of a journal, like, and everything, and read all the other papers? Because what I'm finding, and in my few publications, is you can get a paper rejected, and they'll say this is rejected not based on any scientific criticism, but we think that there's more fitting journals for this, right? And then
you've wasted all this time.
Then you've wasted 6 weeks, 2 months until they get back to you on this. And then you have to find another journal and reformat the whole thing, because it might be a different word count, it might be different, like, requirement for formatting and references and everything. So you have to basically rewrite the paper, right?
Wow. Yeah.
To put in another one. So it is an arduous experience. And I have a lot of ideas on how it could be fixed, but that's again a whole other.
You're writing a book,
right? Yeah. That's one of the books I'm writing is on that. But
you're writing more than one book.
3.
3 books all at once.
Yeah, but they're slow. I mean, when I write blogs, I might be working on 10 at a time. I'm not working on that many right now because I've been busy with some other things.
3
I
books.
I like thinking about things long and deep. You know what I mean? Like I might sit and jot down notes for 2-3 months, right? Gathering my thoughts before like I sit and look at all the notes and be like, okay, I can write 8,000 words out of this. And then I write it as a stream, but I've been thinking about it for months and writing down notes. So
Interesting.
I'm not sitting down every day and working on the book. I think about all 3 of my books pretty much every day, right? Anytime I see something in my normal reading that comes up that really strikes to me, I go in deeper, I write notes, I pull up, my X book document and I write notes and thoughts and musings to see if it ties in. But no, I'm not sitting like at a laptop. Okay, it's time to write every day.
Pound out 5,000 words or whatever today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not how I flow.
That's not how you roll. Okay. All right. Let's get back to hydrogen. Do you want to tell us what 3 books are about, or do you want to kind of sit on that for a while?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, one is on kind of the deterioration of truth in society with ways to fix it.
That's an interesting time. Yeah.
my unique thoughts in having a deep history with marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And knowing how it works at all different levels and, but also the fact that I think I'm going to have like 10 or 11 publications by the end of this year, with the ones that are under manuscript prep and in press and peer review, maybe even more than that. What I'm getting to learn about academia and how information is published and goes through and everything, how everything has to be adopted to fit societal norms and everything, just kind of like a breakdown and critique of that, and then strategies to improve in everything and that. So the one book is basically on truth. Another book is basically my political manifesto. And I've been working on that one for 15, 16 years.
Okay.
Right. So don't expect that one anytime soon, because as society advances, my views keep on adjusting, and this live experiment we're running. And then just, hormesis in general, right? And how to use hormesis. For our lives. I mean, I already wrote like 30,000 words in a series on hormesis, but that was more like a blog series. And I have a lot more thoughts on it now than I did 2.5 years ago when I wrote it.
Yep. All right, cool. All right, 3 books. Let's get back to the hydrogen. So there were 2 other, because then I want to get to the published studies. So there's 3 studies that have been published and you've authored, or you've been an author or both on. But there's 2 mouse studies that you mentioned to me just before we started.
Yeah, so these are the ones that I'm actually an author on. It's really cool, and this is an area of hydrogen research that I think I'm most excited about, in using hydrogen as an adjuvant therapy alongside conventional treatments. So the first one, it published already, and both these are mouse studies, and this one was hydrogen versus sulfasalazine, which is a prescription medication that's approved for like rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis and various inflammatory issues, like autoimmune inflammatory type things, or the combination of the 2, right? And it found that hydrogen was about as effective, right? Actually trended better than sulfasalazine, right? For this DSS-induced colitis model. So it wasn't traditional ulcerative colitis. It was like a chemical, So
it was induced by chemical,
to give the mice colitis. But the combination of hydrogen and sulfasalazine were significant beyond either hydrogen or sulfasalazine on their own.
The 1 + 1 is 3.
Yeah. Right. So that was really, really interesting, because then we found, and another team using the tablets on, post-stroke in rats found the same thing, using hydrogen water made by the tablets with a drug called minocycline, right?
Which they give post-stroke. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So they found synergy there. Right.
So let me ask you a practical question. How do they get the mice to drink the hydrogen water before the hydrogen disappears out of the hydrogen water? Do they
rather than do it rather than do it in an open cup?
Yeah.
Right. You prepare it under pressure, and then it follows a half-life, and then you extrapolate the dosage.
Oh, okay.
Half-life of the water and their drinking schedules, but also we in a lot of the studies we use oral gavage, right? Yeah. So it's kind of injected into their abdomen.
Okay. Right? All right. Little bunnies. All right. Fair enough.
But we saw it, on another study that's actually in press. So it's already made it through peer review and been accepted. I'm a study author. I'm second author on this one, actually. So the first author is the postgrad who conducted all the experiments.
Yeah.
But I wrote the first draft and the majority of the manuscript.
Nice.
Right? The university wrote the methods, right, and the results, and then I wrote kind of the abstract, introduction, discussion, conclusion. But then we all worked on my first draft and all agreed on the final manuscript. Mm-hmm. But this was on colorectal cancer in mice. And we used hydrogen versus fluorouracil, which is it's 5-FU. It's a very common, chemotherapeutic, right? Yeah. And actually, we saw something similar. Is hydrogen was about as effective as 5-FU, right, as standalones. However, right, the combination was again synergistic. So like 1 + 1 = 3. But there were some really interesting things that were observed, right? For instance, hydrogen and 5-F. One thing that you'd think is good about hydrogen versus 5-FU is hydrogen versus 5-FU in all kind of like the cancer progression, markers that we looked at, whether it's, fibrosis, collagen content, tumor size, tumor weight, all these things, they're about the same, but hydrogen improved redox, improved antioxidant activity and suppressed oxidative stress, whereas 5-FU, as we know, it increased oxidative stress and, blunted antioxidant activity. So we're like, okay, is that good? Well, the results are about the same, but we know that we want to stress out, right, the cancer, right? Mm-hmm. That's actually part of how cancer therapies work, right? It is by increasing the stress,
on the cancer
cells and killing them. In the combination of hydrogen plus 5-FU, right, everything was synergistic. Tumor weight, fibrosis, collagen content. It was all decimated. You know what I mean? Like way better than either on their own. But it was actually significant beyond just 5-FU in that the combo of hydrogen plus 5-FU further increased oxidative stress beyond 5-FU alone and further blunted antioxidant. So that could have been why we saw such a marked anti-tumor effect, right, in the combination, because, and this is why I always try and clarify that hydrogen is not an antioxidant.
No, it's selective. Yeah.
It regulates the redox status within the cell. So for whatever reason in this trial, and we've seen it in other trials, we've seen hydrogen raise oxidative stress before rebounding and improving redox. Maybe we would have seen this in a longer study.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this one, it markedly increased oxidative stress and lowered antioxidant activity, but the anti-cancer effects were synergistic beyond either hydrogen or 5-FU on itself.
Is it possible that it was also a case of a spread in the sense that it supports healthy cell? Like the drug on its own is not going to do anything for the healthy cells. It's going to go. It's going to do whatever it does across the board to healthy cells or cancer cells. Yeah. But the hydrogen, is it possible that the actions of hydrogen were supportive to healthy cells and somehow optimized, maybe enhanced?
It's possible. And one of the things that we wrote about, and that's been talked about a lot behind closed doors, so to speak, with professors, and hydrogen experts is we know hydrogen can improve the health of healthy cells. What does it do to cancer cells?
Yeah. Like, does it improve their health or does it? Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that's one of the things. And is it going to be dose dependent, right? Is one dose of hydrogen going to actually cause cancer to become worse, whereas another dose fights against it, and these are things that we really need to research more.
Right.
But at the time being, it appears in the few rodent studies that have been done that using hydrogen in conjunction prove therapeutic, like the good place to study, right? Like the good direction to go.
Yeah. Well, the signs are good anyway, if nothing else. Like, it's an interesting thing. Like, no, hydrogen's not a panacea. It's not going to, do it all. But it's interesting that again, like there's a couple of instances here where combined with a conventional treatment, it seems to enhance the outcome. Yeah. It's just better on its own. And as a matter of fact, even on the caffeine one we're going to talk about, it's a similar situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that actually just published this morning, right? So
I know. So we were both sitting there reading it. Like, how deeply can we talk about this in 10 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't actually read the manuscript since like February or March. So, it popped online right before we came online.
You could have said nothing.
No. But no, it was a cool study. It showed that hydrogen more significantly improved brain metabolism as opposed to caffeine after sleep deprivation. So did the combination, right, of hydrogen and caffeine versus caffeine on its own. A couple of takeaways. I think in the hydrogen group, there was less errors on like a symbol test right after sleep deprivation. And I believe, because caffeine obviously improved brain metabolism in a lot of regions, so did hydrogen, but in the paracentral region of the brain, I believe is where hydrogen or the combo of hydrogen and caffeine improved the brain metabolism, whereas caffeine did not. Right.
Interesting.
I quickly looked. I'm not an expert on brain regions, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but it appears that that's linked with like motor function. But, someone else would speak to that way better than me.
Well, or we can both dig into it and talk about it later, because it's searchable information. But so basically, though, the molecular hydrogen seemed to help with alertness. So because I don't drink any caffeine in the morning personally, caffeine makes my teeth chatter. But I start my day with molecular hydrogen in a cocktail. I'm doing that thing you're not supposed to do. I haven't taken a break from hydrogen in a while, so maybe it's time for me to do a week washout.
Wash out. Honestly, and even from my standpoint as being commercially involved, telling people to wash out actually improves their sales, right?
Because they notice what it does for them.
Exactly. The week they take off. We actually find it's been interesting reviewing, data, both from drinkHRW and being told from, other companies too, is they'll see a gap, right? People take hydrogen for 1-2 months and then they stop taking it, and they might stop taking it for a month and then they order again and they email in like, I didn't realize this was helping until I stopped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen it with my clients, right?
Yeah.
And
the improvements are slower and gradual, right? And then when they stop, things deteriorate more abruptly than they were corrected, in the first place.
I think they notice it more, right? When you stop, all of a sudden you're like reintroduced to whether it's your joint pain or fatigue or whatever the case it is. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, I'm, dragging myself around. I've seen it I've had a few clients now with arthritis, who really, really feel that the hydrogen helps with their pain. And when they stop using it and then they go back to it, they're like, oh, wow, you were right. The other thing, and I don't know if you can speak to this at all today, but the other thing that I've had them do, and they definitely seem to feel that it helps, is soaking, if it's a foot or an ankle, like soaking it in with the molecular hydrogen tablets, the bath tablets that you've got.
Yeah, HT relief. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna do one today, right? Like I said, I've been doing all this hardscaping, landscaping. I'm sparring tonight. I'm gonna go because I've already signed in, and it's a limited, limited space. But I really don't want to because my body is not feeling very good. Like I try and use as good a form as I can, but when you're shoveling, like walk for hours and pushing wheelbarrows and stuff, that is not fun work. I feel pretty broken right now. We do have a couple studies on the bath tablets, a couple clinical trials. One was on the bath tablets versus rice protocol, right? Which is rest
ice. Yeah.
After grade 2 ankle tears in pro soccer players.
Yeah.
And it found they were equivalent, but hydrogen was actually trending to be better than rice protocol in multiple areas. It just wasn't a big enough study group to hit statistical significance. But hydrogen was probably practically better, clinically better, if that trend held up. You know what I mean? If they recruit people and the same thing is seen, then it would have been clinically significant, right? And hydrogen being better than rice. Another was a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized crossover study on delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yeah.
Hydrogen significantly reduced DOMS, right? Delayed onset muscle soreness, both by, the tests, like the reported muscle soreness scale, but also they measured some markers and it protected creatine kinase levels, right? Which is, linked to muscle damage.
Right.
So definitely it's, I can say with our pro athletes, the bath tablets are maybe as, if not, I'd say more popular than the drinking the water. I'd say with our pro athletes, Boost and H2 Relief are the two most popular things. It's what they ask for.
Yeah,
right?
Boost is the formula. Why don't you tell the audience a bit about Boost?
Yeah, Boost, it's you drop 2 hydrogen tablets in, so you are getting the hydrogen, but it also has 1.5 grams of nitrosogene, which is a patented ingredient to improve nitric oxide, to raise nitric oxide. So 1.5 grams of nitrosogene has shown to outperform 8 grams of citrulline malate.
Yeah.
Right. In a number of ways. So, and then there's 200 milligrams of caffeine, which, so that's in a healthy dose. I mean,
it's a good dose for anybody else. I was vibrating.
Well, think about how much coffee some people drink.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for sure. This is a drop in the bucket.
Exactly. Right. And that's what we tried to do because basically the metadata on caffeine shows that for most people, up to about 400 milligrams a day is actually healthy. It improves your health. It, improves cognition. It actually may protect against decline in cognition in the elderly. It's when you go above that, that becomes an issue. And when people are drinking 6 Starbucks a day, 10 coffees a day, 6 monsters or something a day, even some of these some pre-workouts have 500 milligrams of caffeine, even a gram of caffeine in 1 scoop, right?
Yeah.
These are the things that are causing serious health issues, even in the youth.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
Heavy, over stimulant use, right, from energy drinks and pre-workouts and stuff is being linked to increased anxiety and depression and, sleep disturbances and all of these issues, right? And not even that, heart issues and what I mean, serious issues from this overstimulation. So we sat down and we settled on 200 milligrams of caffeine because 200 milligrams of caffeine is going to be a performance enhancer even for someone who's caffeine habituated. They're not going to go, off the wires, but it's going to still have an effect on them, right? But it's a healthy dose.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Cause them to get, all messed up. And of course, we've talked about all hydrogen and brain metabolism, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, hydrogen and caffeine, actually, the reason we did the study with MRI is because the first study on hydrogen versus caffeine, they equivalently raised alertness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in different domains,
I was going to
right?
say probably in different ways, right?
Yeah, they improved on different tests, right? In the attention
Interesting.
memory. So it's like, hydrogen was better for like orienting, but caffeine was better for alertness. You know what I mean? So that's kind of why we did that test. But then, nitrosamine has also shown to raise, attention after sleep deprivation. And then if you look, it's a healthy dose of caffeine, but then with the nitric oxide and the hydrogen, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
be improving your health too. So
Yeah.
we try to design something that not only is going to work for you to get up and go and feel great, and not make you high so that you can't do anything. We designed this not just for athletes, but people working in an office that need to go to a meeting, that need to get through a project, that need to write, so that you're not.
Yeah.
And again, you don't drink coffee, so 200 milligrams is a high hit, right? For you.
You know what I'm wondering though, because I used it fasted, and I wonder if what I need to do is get something into my stomach just to blunt the hit.
Yeah, and
Because-
try to use it when you're super tired too.
Yeah, no, because the nitric oxide actually will offset some of the negatives of caffeine for me, right? If caffeine is going to cause vasoconstriction in me, then the nitric oxide should offset that rather well. I mean, I had a great workout. Don't get me wrong. I think it's just the unfamiliarity of the caffeine boost to me. That was, but now that I think of it, I wonder if I should try it again and just have something in my stomach, a little bit beforehand.
I take exactly 400 milligrams of caffeine every day, right? And
Precisely.
I used to take,
okay.
I don't drink coffee, so I used to take 2, 100 milligram each caffeine pills in the morning and 2 at lunch, right? Now I take 2 in the morning, and then days that I want to boost, I do a boost, probably 4 or 5 days a week when I'm going to exercise right before. So the caffeine just basically staves off my habituation, so I don't get any like caffeine high. But man, like the hydrogen and the nitric oxide like that gets me up and going so much more than just taking 2 caffeine pills.
Well, and so it's interesting, right? So there's a recurring trend here with hydrogen in that it seems to amplify or work synergistically with a lot of, I'm not going to say everything, but with a lot of the different agents that you're pairing it with, whether it's a medication or this chemo drug or caffeine or whatever. It seems to be like a signal booster almost.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I've been really trying to push to get more research done on.
Yeah, for sure.
With other therapies, right? I think that's the future, right? I think we need to start thinking of hydrogen as hydrogen will help you, if you're healthy, deal with acute stress, and it's what we were talking about before we started recording. We get a lot of biohackers that are like, yeah, I'm so interested in the science of hydrogen, but I don't really notice much.
Yeah.
Well, if you're in perfect health, you're not going to notice much, right? And they'll say like, yeah, I don't notice it personally, but I give it to a friend or a family member, or, a client, and they're like, wow, this is like, helping me
Amazing.
so much.
Yeah.
For people like you, like speaking, to any audience members that this resonates with, don't take hydrogen every day, right? Mm-hmm. Take it days that you've dealt with additional stress.
So this is to the optimized people.
To the optimized people, right? Take it days that you didn't get a good sleep, or that you worked out extra hard, or, you ate a bunch of crap, right? Like on a cheat day, or you drank too much. Like that's when you should take hydrogen, maybe a few times a week, right? Like, if you need it, don't take it every day. People who are dealing with more issues, like me, I have arthritis in 11 spots. If I don't take hydrogen every day, I seize up, right? And when when I wash out every 3 to 6 months, I do seize up. I can't work out. I'm like the Tin Man, right? I can't move my joints. Like I can't sleep properly, right? But I know also that before we started developing this washout strategy, even for me, hydrogen stopped working after like a year and a half, right? I seized up anyways.
Oh,
Right?
interesting.
Because I think I'd become completely habituated to it, at
Right.
the dose and the time of day. And luckily, I knew enough about this area that I'm like, all right, I'm going to give something a try. And I washed out, and I think I didn't take it for like 2 weeks, and I wasn't in any more agony because I was already in agony. And then I completely changed the dose and the time of day and the way I was doing it. And a couple weeks later, I was like back to feeling okay. And I'm like, huh. And then I told that to like some family members and friends who were some of the first ones who were using my hand pressed tablets.
Yeah.
They had all been reporting the same thing. Like, my mom's like rheumatoid arthritis had flared back up, and like she was in a lot of pain. Like, my dad was all stiff and, everything. And they washed out and did the same thing like I told them. And it was just overwhelmingly, everyone's like, okay, I'm getting the benefits back again.
Interesting.
So we don't have any clinical research on this,
but
anecdotally, anecdotes. And there's one really interesting study which I think points to this. And it was like a 5-year study, right? And after it was on patients on dialysis, and a big multi-center study in Japan. And after 1 year, there were significant benefits. They had better outcomes in the patients, needed lower medications, just significantly outperforming placebo. Then by the end of the 5 years, there was no difference, right? Mm-hmm. There was no significance, right? Yeah. But they had hydrogen at the same dose, at the same time, every day.
Right. Interesting. And so when you're changing up the dose and the time, so let's say for me right now, I'm doing my 2 tablets first thing in the morning. So I might switch that up and start doing it at lunch or in the afternoon sometime, or split it up, even do one tablet in the morning and 1 in the afternoon instead of doing the 2 in the morning. Just
and yeah, and if you're able to do something like this, I know a lot of people like routine. I change it up day to day now too, which I think helps.
Yeah.
Like one day I might take it first thing in the morning, right? Yeah. Then the next day I take it before a workout in the evening, right? And then, another day a week, I don't drink and I bathe, right? Yeah. And have water and get it in that way. And I kind of skip around, and one other day I might take a smaller dose twice in the day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. So I try and change it up randomly day to day.
Yeah.
But I know that's tough on people, right? Because people like their routine.
Yeah. But what you're doing is you're almost creating different occasions when you might use it. Right. Yeah. So on a day when you're going to use the boost, which is 2 tablets of molecular hydrogen, you might say that's my molecular hydrogen use for this. Exactly. Right. Whereas on another day,
I might take 5 first thing in the morning.
Exactly. Right? So let me ask you something. So 2 other things. So actually you mentioned hydrogen for hangovers, and we talked about this before we started recording the podcast, about when may be the best time. Not that we're telling people that they should go out and pound bottles of wine or anything, but
we have a small study. It was very well controlled, double-blind placebo-controlled crossover that showed hydrogen greatly improved hangovers, right? And it improved sleep after alcohol. It's actually interesting. Some of the stress markers were interesting. Hydrogen might have blunted stress in lower dosages, and then, potentiated stress overnight in higher doses, because there's 3 levels of alcohol intake that were done, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't a set alcohol. It was based on body weight, right? Too.
Oh, okay. All right.
But so, and this is tough because I know it goes against some of my experiences. It goes against our anecdotes. It goes against what you were saying, but it could have just been that things were already corrected. So in this study, hydrogen was taken twice the day before alcohol was done. in the morning before drinking, and then after the alcohol was consumed before bed.
Right after the alcohol was consumed, but before bed. Okay.
Right. And then a hangover test was done in the morning.
Yeah.
And then either placebo or hydrogen was taken, and then the hangover test was done again.
Okay.
But, like it was either they took placebo morning before bed, next morning, or hydrogen all 3 times. So they didn't get mixed around in those 3 tests. Anyways, hydrogen, the hangover tests right away in the morning were significantly better in the hydrogen group.
Yeah.
They were still better, right, after the morning intervention, but there was not another significant increase. You know what I mean? It basically maintained the improvements, a slight.
Oh, you mean when they took it again in the morning, after they took it?
After the morning test.
Okay, so
the first morning.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
So the first morning test, hydrogen was significantly better in multiple areas than the placebo test. Then they took the hydrogen of the placebo and then redid the test half an hour later. So
right.
Second test, hydrogen was still better than placebo, right? Yeah. A little bit more better, if that makes sense. But didn't reach statistical significance.
I see.
And I'm not sure if that's because so much benefit was already done in the preemptive hydrogen.
Okay, so let me just repeat that to you, because I think what you're saying is that the biggest bump in benefit was seen in the first test that was done in the morning after the night before. So and then it was only a baby bump after that when they took it again in the morning. Yeah. Okay, cool. So without a doubt, guys, taking it if you want to optimize your support from the hydrogen, whatever it's going to be, taking it the morning of and then taking it before bed, kind of like a lot of people will take an anti-inflammatory when they've gone out drinking. They'll do
one of the cool things about this study too, the reason I'd say take it the day before is the hydrogen group was very significant in sleep was longer and better quality.
Yeah. So right away you get a benefit. Yeah.
Better total sleep time and better like combined deep and REM sleep.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that's a useful tip for you guys. And then the other thing that we talked about that I wanted to touch on was magnesium. You said something about, I couldn't remember which study.
Sorry, it was the elderly study, and I forgot. And there was
forgot about that. Yeah.
I forgot to mention in that elderly study. So basically, there are some things, and this is what I like telling people. Hydrogen doesn't do the same thing all the time. Like we talk about the metabolic benefits of hydrogen. Mm-hmm. Nothing significance in metabolic profiles in the elderly study, but they were all in a normal range, right? So there was nothing to correct. There was a slight trend in cholesterol, but cholesterol wasn't high, and it was just a slight trend. But same thing, even like they were elderly, so their oxidative stress was a bit higher than normal, but they were healthy elderly. So it wasn't on the charts bad. So actually there was a very strong trend, right, in improved redox. Like, basically less oxidative stress and more antioxidant activity, in the elderly study. If there was more participants and it kept up, it would have been significant. Mm-hmm. But again, this was of note because they weren't that elevated, right? And it still had a strong trend. But also, interesting, and a lot of people know this is we're magnesium deficient as a population, and actually elderly are the ones who are told by their physicians to take magnesium supplements, so maybe they're less deficient than the average person who doesn't think they need it. But the placebo has the same amount of magnesium as the hydrogen tablet.
Oh, it does. Right? Okay.
And there was a strong trend for higher serum magnesium than in the placebo group, which just goes with what I keep on telling people. The way the tablet works to have free magnesium ions in the water, it should be significantly more bioavailable than magnesium supplements. right? Because your body doesn't have to do any work to break.
Well, that and the fact that it's being delivered with the great amplifier that is now becoming known as hydrogen.
Yeah.
Like, could it be with again, this synergistic effect with magnesium and somehow.
So, yeah, I mean, that could be, I mean.
Or it could be a piece of it anyway. Yeah.
That was a strong trend. Again, more people would have reached statistical significance. This is one thing I talk about too, right? Like it's hard if a study is underpowered, not enough people.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't reach significance because there's not enough people.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So in research, it could be that you see the same trend over and over again, right? But it's never reaching significance. And now it's just, oh, well, hydrogen or anything doesn't do that because it hasn't worked in 6 trials. Mm-hmm. But if you combine those 6 trials, all of a sudden it's significant. You know what I mean? But the reverse happens because sometimes when a trial is underpowered, you reach significance and it was just a fluke, right? So
right.
It's really tough to decipher this stuff, but that makes sense because we know that the way we're delivering magnesium should be a lot more bioavailable than magnesium supplements. So there was a strong trend there, and we're going to look at this more, but the strong trend was what we expected from the biochemistry, of how it worked.
Amazing.
But the final one for any older people listening, this was a cool finding. They did something called the senior fitness test, and hydrogen was significantly better than placebo for something called the chair stand, right? Mm-hmm. The sit and stand. So you sit down and stand up as many times as you can, right? Which is a big thing for elderly people, right? To get out.
Depends on the 70-year-old. I know some pretty fit 70-year-olds, but yes.
Sure. But actually at the end of the 6 months, the hydrogen group could sit and stand more times than they could at the beginning. Right. And it was significant over placebo. So
and they weren't training during the 6 months, just to be clear, guys. It's not like they were put on a training plan.
They were actually on a national lockdown. So
Right. So it actually should have gotten worse. And it was compared to controls.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Did we forget anything?
I think we got everything.
I think we got everything too. I think this was a good conversation. We covered a lot of ground we meant to cover and ground that maybe we didn't meant to cover. So I think, and the other thing I wanted to say is you mentioned that in this study, it didn't affect their metabolism, their blood sugar, cholesterol, and you made a really important point that I really want to highlight, and it keeps coming up over and over again, is that it appears that the most significant impact that we seem to be seeing in molecular hydrogen studies is when there is dysregulation at play, because there are other trials that were done on people with metabolic dysregulation, with impaired blood glucose response, where the molecular hydrogen did show benefit for those guys, and quite significantly.
And they're very strong, in like metabolic syndrome and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The results were striking. They were very significant, right?
Exactly.
But the people had abnormal levels, and in this study they did not.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So I think that's important to
what we expect too, and it's what I always say is, if your levels are healthy, don't expect hydrogen to do anything for that particular area. Mm-hmm. That's just not how hydrogen works. Hydrogen is kind of like a supervisor in your cells. When things are going wrong, it goes and tries and fix what's going wrong. If everything's going right, it's not going to just go and alter that. That just is not how hydrogen works.
Yeah, molecular hydrogen, the if it ain't broke, don't fix it molecule. Yeah. Okay, fine. I won't quit my day job, whatever that is. All right. So I think we've pretty much covered it all. Actually, do you want to talk about last thing, I guess, for full transparency, is that, so you author some of these trials. You've provided molecular hydrogen for the trials as well, all in the name of getting more bloody data on this stuff.
Yeah, and
So
I want to clarify kind of this stuff.
yeah,
Like I'm at it as an author on some of these trials because of my contributions, right? And
yeah,
that's how academia works, right? I'm on a lot of calls discussing some of the mechanisms, discussing tablet technology. Um, they basically like it's how academia works. I'm an author at that point,
right.
right? Um, in basically all of these trials, I don't own the data or the rights to publish the data. So
Perfect.
I might give a small donation,
Yeah.
right, to the trial,
Like
to
a
the
product.
of products, sometimes of some additional funds so that they
Yeah.
can expand the trial. Always they have their own grant funds and their own staffing and everything like that.
Okay.
And you want to think of a trial on the private market might cost, say, $300,000 and I donate 10.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm not
You're not
in
owning it.
exactly. I'm not enriching these professors' labs by any means. It's just their grant might cover all of these things, and we start talking. I'm like, man, like it'll be such a better study if we can measure this too. And they're like, well, I don't really have the funds to do that because most labs are always on a budget trying to
For
figure
sure.
out what they can do on the budget. So I'll donate product and placebo and maybe a little bit extra funds if it's a study I want to do. But they have final authority on protocol, right? So I don't have a say in what the protocol is. And they have final right on if they want to publish the data, right? So most private companies have rights to own the data and they pay the $300,000, not donate the
Okay.
10.
Well, I'm so glad we brought this up.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So what that does is that lets them control the protocol so they can set it up in a way that gives it the best chance of working, even if it's not practical, right? Yeah. And won't help people in the real world. And if it doesn't work, they can throw it in the garbage.
They bury it. Yeah.
I don't believe that's right. I think that's bad for the truth, bad for science. So at the end of the day, on all of our trials, it's always the research teams, the professors, that have the right on if they want to publish data or not.
Cool.
Right. And there's other things like, I mean, there's studies, recently that there's things I thought were important that I'm like, okay, you should report this, but it didn't hit significance, or it's mostly anecdotal, but the small subgroups or the anecdotes are exactly in line with what we'd expect. And I think that information should be out there. But, the professors might say, well, we can't start sub-analyzing groups like that. That's not how we do science. I have no say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is what I really like making sure people realize. We're very involved in research, but we try and keep this line of separation, right? To ensure that we're not controlling the research and greatly influencing it.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, I'm glad we brought that up. So I think we're done. I think for this time, we're kind of done-ish. So Alex, thank you as always for your time, and thank you for your support. I will, come out with it, and thank you for sponsoring the podcast. You guys have been amazing this year in your support for this podcast and all the different things that I talk about. And it's and I personally, I've been lucky that I can still be pretty darn picky about who my sponsors are. So if it's the kind of thing, like if I wasn't going to talk about it in the first place, or if I was embarrassed to talk about it, it just wouldn't fly. So
yeah, I share those values.
I know we talked about it at length. So guys, if you don't know about Alex's further thoughts on all this stuff, then you can go listen to our episode from last year. And I think I published it probably in October, at the very beginning, in October of November of 2020. And that was another really good episode. But I think they're just going to keep getting better and better as you get more and more of this data in and more trials published. So thanks for everything that you do. And why don't we tell people where they can find you if you want to be found in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read any of my blogs and everything, they're at, for the time being, they're at drinkHRW.com.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're separating to a content website that's devoted just totally to content, because so much of our content doesn't have to do with hydrogen water. It has to do with biohacking reviews. It has to do with philosophy, right? Like all that type of stuff. So we're and now that we have so many other content writers too, PhDs, MDs that are contributing articles, I think we're going to segue to another website, but I don't handle any of that stuff, so.
All right.
But for now, drinkHRW.com. I know it's at drinkHRW on like Instagram and stuff too. But yeah, for like my blogs and articles and newsletters and everything, go to the drinkHRW.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And guys, you can get a 10% discount on all your molecular hydrogen products at drinkHRW.com with promo code longevity10. And on that note, I think we will say goodbye and let you go soak in that tub of hydrogen to get ready for your workout today.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care. Thanks so much, Alex.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, because that's what helps us to be heard and to be seen. If you'd like to connect with me directly, or if you'd like to leave any comments, or if you have any questions about this episode, please reach out to me directly through my website, natnidham.com. And of course, if you're not already a member of the Biohacking Superhuman Performance community on Facebook, that's where you'll find me every day. It's a short application. Just answer a couple of questions and you're in and interfacing with other amazing biohackers. Thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.